Hi, welcome to Faith Before the Flood. Today we are making sourdough baguettes, and I got the original recipe from Farmhouse on Boone from Lisa Bass, and it's an amazing recipe. I've made it one time before, and then I also made it this time around for a family gathering that we were going to have. So you can see I am filling up my bowl with flour. I am going to auto-lyse the flour. I don't always auto-lyse, but I've been trying that lately just to see how that goes. So here I am adding 625 grams, and I am using an unbleached all-purpose flour. I do think the bag said that this was a higher protein flour, higher gluten probably flour, and it's a flour that I buy in bulk. So it's not like a name brand that you would get at a big box store or anything like that. Here I am adding the 450 grams of kind of warm water. So we're just going to mix these together, and then I am going to let them rest together for 30 minutes. So my goal here is to really just get all of that really well combined to help that all of that flour hydrate as well as possible. Okay, I've got these tools cleaned up as much as possible, and now we're going to cover it and let it rest for about 30 minutes. Okay, here I'm taking the cover off, and I'm going to put some dimples in it, and I'm going to add my starter, 100 grams roughly, and then also roughly 13 grams of salt, which I don't stick to those measurements exactly. I do think I go over, if I remember correctly, a little bit on both of those. So here's that beautiful starter. I'm going to mix that in, get it all mixed in and combined. So as I am getting that starter mixed in, this bowl was moving around so much. I eventually, you'll see later in the video, add a towel underneath it. So I am so sorry that that is moving around as much as it is. I should have thought to add the towel a lot sooner than I did. So here we're adding the salt. That's 14 grams. I think the recipe calls for 13. So we're just going to get that sprinkled on there and then mix that in as best we can with our hands. And then the stretch and folds also help to really distribute that a little bit more evenly. I've done both methods where you auto-lyse the flour, and I've also done the method where you mix your water and your starter into the bowl, and then you add your flour and salt. And both methods have their pros and cons. I'm not really sure which one I would say that I prefer. So again, just continuing to really try to get it mixed in there, and then we're going to let it rest for 30 minutes covered and come back and do another round. We're going to do our first stretch and fold. I think the recipe calls for 6 stretch and folds, and so this will be our first right here. I always keep a little bowl of lukewarm water to dip my hands in when I'm doing stretch and folds. I find that helps keep the most of the dough from sticking to my hands, and it keeps your dough really hydrated as you're going. You can see this is already turning into a pretty nice little dough. You can see there when I flipped it over, there was a little bit of that salt that still hadn't really gotten mixed in well. So that's something I'm going to have to work on if I make this recipe going forward. So we're just going to continue this stretch and fold just a few more times around, get it tucked in there, cover it, and let it rest again. And we're going to come back for our second. Here we are uncovering it, starting our second round of stretch and folds. Again, I keep that warm bowl of water right there to wet my hands. And, I say 30 minutes between stretch and folds. Sometimes I will set a timer to remind myself so I don't forget the dough and just leave it there. I have done that before. But, you know, if you're doing something and it's a little bit longer between times, that's something I don't think people really, I think people overcomplicate sourdough and they don't understand that it's more forgiving than your yeasted doughs. I love this part. It's already turning into so stretchy and just such a fun dough. I think I only did 3 stretch and folds with this particular dough. I think the recipe tells you to do 6, but again, it's a pretty forgiving dough. I guess I didn't record the 3rd stretch and fold. Here we are sinking it to the dough, and good morning. Look at those big, beautiful bubbles. Okay, we are ready to get some work done with this beautiful dough. We're going to sprinkle some flour on our work surface here. I hear a lot of people talk about using rice flour in some of these steps in the later stages. I don't have any rice flour, so I just used what I had, which is all-purpose flour. And here we're going to do our dough dump and watch it pull away from the bowl. Look at all of those fantastic bubbles from that side. So here I'm just going to make sure that it's not stuck to my work surface, and I'm going to kind of get it into a cohesive shape. I think at one point when I was doing this, I forgot that I wasn't making an artisan loaf and that I was making the baguettes this time around. You could see there I almost started to roll it up into a bowl shape. So I've kind of got it laid out how I want to for working, and I'm going to cut it into 3 equal-ish parts. I could have weighed this on my scale. I just didn't. I eyeballed it and just did the best that I could. We're not a professional bakery here. We're just cooking for a family get-together. So here we're going to kind of stretch these out into rectangles. And then this mat that I am working on, this dough mat, actually has inches, I think, on the top. And I use that here in a minute to measure, to kind of get them all the general same size. So we're going to stretch that out into a rectangle, and then we're going to roll them up, try to get it as tight as we can. That's an area that I'm struggling with these baguettes, is to get that surface tension. It's a lot harder to do with this shape for me. So here we have them all three roughly the same size and shape, and we are going to make a homemade baking couche. I do not have a baguette pan at this point, so I'm just going to do the best that I can with what I have. So to make that, you're going to take clean fabric, clean tea towel, something like that, and you're going to create these folds, these pleats between the loaves to keep them separate and help them hold their shape. You can see that I've pre-floured this. Again, making do with what we have, we're going to take these chip clip that I have bought at Walmart, I think, and we're going to pull those pleats to the end and use these clips to pinch them all together. You can also see that I slid this fabric onto my baking sheet so that I can easily transport it. You know, if I wanted to let this ferment overnight in the fridge, you just pick up the baking sheet and move it. So here's the after. You can see that they're a little bit stuck together. Normally I would have overnight fermented these. I just did it at room temperature for a couple of hours. The fabric did get quite wet. I'm not sure how it would have done overnight. I'm curious to see. I'm eventually just going to have to get myself a baguette pan, but here I am transferring them from that to a lined with parchment paper baking tray. I think the recipe says you can cold ferment this for up to like 36 hours. And in the past I've done, I think it was like 12 hours in the fridge overnight. I did this one at room temperature for I think like 4 or 5 hours. And I honestly think they might look a little bit overproofed, but you'll see here in a minute when I lay this last one on that baking sheet what I'm talking about. Kind of looks like a soupy mess, and I was really worried that it just was not going to turn out well at all. Here's a better angle to see what I'm kind of talking about. That one on the far left just does not look well at all. And again, these are so hard to get any kind of surface tension on. But here we go. We're going to score them and put them in the oven and see how they do. So I have preheated my oven to 450 at this point. And then I don't mist them. The recipe calls for maybe misting them. And there's a couple other steps like boiling water in a cake pan. But instead, I just threw some ice in the bottom of my oven once in the beginning, and then I did it a couple of times later, about halfway through baking, I think. And here you can see they've got an excellent outer crust. The cross section is beautiful. They turned out really well, honestly, a lot better than I had anticipated that they were going to turn out. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, and I hope you are encouraged to try on your own.